So, hello everyone. Welcome to our fourth LinkedIn Live. My name is Dijana, and we at Impact Hero wish to create greater social awareness about the global challenges outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals, which we take as our not just a framework, but more a framework, and addressing topics such as climate change and biodiversity. This is also the reason why we start our company, where we really wish that the services that the company or your companies do can also be of service to the world. And with our solutions, you can, for example, plant a baby coral for every product sold, or gift a tree for every employee every month, or also enable a square meter of regenerative agriculture every time, for example, someone books a Calendly invite. So infinite number of opportunities to engage in restoring our planet. Of course, easier said than done. But one thing is for sure is that we wish to see businesses as a part of the solution and therefore kind of multipliers of positive impact. This can't be done without collective action. And we are aware that we play a very tiny role in contributing to the larger systemic change that needs to be done. With today's conversation, firstly, actually, we hope to bring the attention to such an important topic of transforming towards regenerative economy. We will talk, that will be topic also of today's conversation, and hopefully inspire anyone listening to this to bring a bit of this kind of conversation into their business setting, but also not just conversation, hopefully also certain actioning. Our guest today is a wonderful human, Dr. Aditi Ramdorai, director at Systemiq and director of business development at Regeneration. And with the great respect we have for work of Systemiq and their whole team, those that do not know, Systemiq is a system change company and also think tank dedicated to accelerating the delivery of the Paris Agreement and also the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, but really transforming markets and business model in areas such as nature, clean energy, and circular economy. And would love to welcome now Aditi to join me. Hello, dear Aditi. Welcome. And Aditi actually focuses on really helping corporates in the area of food and agriculture on their net zero and food system transition journeys. Aditi is also building a Regeneration, which is a Systemiq joint venture, and on a mission to help corporates procure kind of nature positive commodities at scale. Aside of all this professional part, when Aditi is not working, she's also proud mother of her two kids, and she loves to perfection her handstand in yoga studio, something I need to still work on. But Aditi, welcome. And before we start our topic today, main topic, I would love to know a bit more about your personal transition. There is transition you made from McKinsey to Systemiq. And as our wish also with this conversation is that as many individuals with prominent careers as you already had would join the sustainability movement, I wonder what was the moment that you decided to dedicate your time to sustainability and positive impact, and what was your personal journey to get there? And also if there is any fact that really shocked you the most, that inspired that change.
First of all, thanks so much, Dijana, for having me. I'm very happy to talk folks through my the work I do and the journey I've had so far. So, you asked me about kind of my path to Systemiq. I think it really started off with. I've worked in the impact space for a really long time. So I did my PhD on affordable healthcare in the emerging markets. And even at McKinsey, I spent time at our think tank, the McKinsey Global Institute, where I did a lot of research on both sustainable development in the global south as well as on global health. In maybe a little too late, but at some point, in my research, uh, on these two topics, I think what I came to realize was that by 2040 and 2050, kind of the timelines that we typically do our research in, on important societal, macroeconomic, and business trends at the think tank, I realized that the climate and nature crisis were really the biggest kind of threat to humanity and risk to the two big areas that I cared about, namely global health and sustainable development. And kind of as I got deeper into that, I came to realize that's really intellectually the main problem I want to continue working on. And my, I guess, path to systemic was very close, given, as you said, we're an advisory firm and think tank, and Systemiq was founded by two former McKinsey senior partners, and so I had connections at Systemiq.
Nice. Yeah,
Sorry, and then you wanted to know about the facts as well. So in my journey to kind of when I said like the climate and nature crisis is what I really want to focus on, the one thing that I did was I took a online course with Terra.do. It's also a company that I've invested in, and they are on a mission to get 100 million people to work on climate action, right? And so that really empowered me in terms of giving me the depth of knowledge that I needed around climate science, around the problem, around the solutions across the different sectors, because this is really something that affects every sector in our economy, right? So that's the one kind of important piece of, I guess, upskilling that really helped me on my journey. And every friend that I have sent to do the same thing has come back and been very, very happy with it. And as part of that course, the kind of shocking thing I learned about, which I didn't know about previously, was the concept of tipping points. We had a session with a climate scientist called Dr. Chip Fletcher. His talk is also available on YouTube. But the thing that kind of shocked me most was the whole concept of permafrost, which is basically large swaths of land under ice in parts of Siberia and Canada. And kind of, if you think kind of beyond 3 degrees, 4 degrees, what might happen as to this system, right, is that it can release a large amount of methane. In fact, there's twice as much methane under these permafrosts as there is the CO2 equivalent in the atmosphere. So once these ice sheets kind of break through and release the carbon that is stored underneath, there's really kind of no going back. So once I heard this YouTube, or once I heard the session with Dr. Fletcher, I think I kind of had sleepless nights for several weeks after.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think despite all the shocking numbers that we are seeing, also recently or every day coming up, still I feel there's still so much more to be done, right? And yeah, I also just want to give a shout out to Tara. Do also post it here in chat, just for anyone that wants to get additionally inspired or is making transition in the job, or wants to make transition towards more sustainable jobs, to check them out. Okay, so but let's okay, that's one part of the big problem, and I think the big problems also require big solutions, and that's why I think the work that you are doing at Systemic is so crucial, right? Thinking in the more system approach and system way. So at Systemic, you're basically doing and focusing, or actually you're doing an advisory on food. The idea is that we do work in different systems, and you chose to focus on food and nature system. We're also very much aware, and we'll talk about it briefly later, but yeah, the food and nature systems are, or how we have them today, are a huge driver of climate change and also biodiversity loss. So therefore, yeah, the work needs to be done. What is the work that you are doing at Systemic, and yeah, what are maybe even the challenges that the corporates who come to Systemic actually are facing, and how do you help them to overcome these challenges?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So at Systemic, I'm, like you said, working on the food and nature system. I kind of wear two hats in my role. I advise corporates in the food and ag value chain, right? Everyone from retailers to food companies to the financiers of the food and ag sector globally. That's kind of the advisory role, and some of the big questions that companies come to us with is how to kind of develop their net zero strategy and how do they implement parts of it, right? So that's one. The other is I'm with Regeneration, and I can tell you more about it, but this is a partnership between Systemic and Palladium, and we're on a mission to scale nature positive tropical commodity supply chains, right? Like agroforestry coffee and agroforestry cocoa. Why am I working on food and nature? I think it's very compelling to think about the fact that our food systems are responsible for about a third of our global emissions and over like 90% of deforestation and biodiversity loss. But at the same time, to be able to meet the Paris climate goals, right? Nature is just immensely critical. It will also get us one third of the way to achieving Paris if we invest now and we invest the right amount. And so I feel like I'm working on both sides of this coin, right? So how do you reduce the negative impacts from food? But on the other hand, what is that brighter tomorrow in terms of, you know, innovation in the space that could really scale nature-based solutions as part of getting us to the Paris goals.
Great. And I mean, what would you then say? So practically, your work with Systemic. So you have also great corporates that you're working with. I mean, what are the challenges that they are facing, and how are you helping them to get over that?
Yeah, I think you can continue thinking about this in this dichotomy, right? So, to be able to achieve the Paris climate goals in every system, right, you need to do less of the bad and you need to do more of the good, right? You need innovation. So, what we're doing with corporates is kind of helping them, you know, think about how they can achieve their net zero targets. It can be in terms of developing like a strategy. It can be about, developing very specific or implementing with them, very specific, let's say, building blocks on, uh, achieving this strategy, right? It could be everything from how should they think about, uh, you know baselining their emissions. How should they think about, which levers will get them to net zero? How they think about what these levers will cost them, and how they should weigh it against the risks of doing nothing. And more importantly, and this is why at Systemic, one of our values is the system is our client, right? So even if we work for a specific corporate, we will think broadly in terms of the system. So in this case, very often the questions we ask is, who should they partner with, right? In a pre-competitive way to, help them achieve, let's say, scaling regenerative agriculture in a certain part of the region that they're active in, things like that. So it's really about thinking more systemically, collaborating with other key players in the value chain, with NGOs, right, in order to achieve their targets. And I mean, food companies are, it's pretty tough, right? Like almost all large food companies have set science-based targets for climate, which is really the gold standard in terms of corporate climate action. But as a whole, right, in the food system and even among many of these players, their broader kind of value chain emissions or scope 3 emissions are still increasing. So it's not going to be easy, and it will take very deep engagement and partnership with everyone along the value chain up to the farmer to be able to achieve this by 2050.
Yeah, and I like what you say that, yeah, actually the system is everyone's client. And I'm wondering, I mean, this is said one big project and goal that you have with Systemic is, in a way, regeneering our industries. It's also re-networking, as you say, our cities, and also regenerating the whole surrounding ecosystems. How do you think this is changing the future of business and the world? And yeah, how and why is that so important again?
Yeah, I think corporates are increasingly looking at this from a risk lens and from an opportunity lens. I think from the risk lens, it's very clear, right? Like Europe is leading in terms of regulations. It will be absolutely essential for companies to kind of report their emissions and let's say the risk factors, right, around the transition. And there will be one form of carbon tax or the other, right, at least in large markets that they're active in. And carbon tax doesn't mean that there's just one, like, carbon price or something like that. It could come in very many different forms, right? So this is going to happen, and it's about preparing for those risks in the future. I think the opportunity lens has also become increasingly clear, right? I think there is, I'm not such a fan of the word green growth, but there, in some sense, right, this is the transition to a low carbon future and a nature positive future, right, is going to be the biggest reallocation of resources in our generation, right? There's going to be a huge amount of investment in the next couple of decades. And, companies who move early are part of this early on will stand to benefit, right? So I think you can see it from these two angles, and this is what also we are increasingly seeing from our corporate partners, and how we, help them think through their options.
Yeah, exactly. And really how important it is to see that as a great opportunity, right? And not only be scared of what is coming and what are we all contributing to, but how can we, take that as an opportunity to differentiate, to see why actually businesses will be relevant as they are today, also in the 10 years from now. But then when it comes to regeneration part, inside of also systemic, also loving this word, which is becoming very popular now. So all of those, I'm sure as well, some people haven't heard that trendy word. What does the regeneration as a word in the context of climate change in the first place stands for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way we see it, is until now, sustainability was about doing less harm, right? Whereas now it's about contributing to, or, contributing to making things better, right? I really love the term net positive, the way Paul Polman kind of frames it. And I think that thinking goes along the same lines in terms of like leaving the world better than, how you found it.
Exactly. Yeah, we also wrote one white paper. Maybe we can also post later, or anyone can find it also on our website. About exactly this transition or going beyond net zero. Of course, so crucial to, that we reach those targets, or at least move strongly and accelerate the transition towards those. But also as well, how can we engage any kind of stakeholders to move beyond that? Yeah. And again, really shoot for the stars or for the moon to end up among the stars, I guess. But with regeneration, so let's say at Systemic, you're more on advisory side, and then with regeneration, you are focusing more on implementation. So it goes beyond advisory, which I think it's also very, very important. Can you explain exactly what do you do there? And then also to try to kind of bring it back to the whole system thinking.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So, at a high level, right? Regeneration's mission is to protect and restore nature by helping scale regenerative tropical value chains. So, it started off as it is a partnership between Systemic and Palladium, and it actually started off 7 years ago because our organizations have been managing multiple large scale nature and forest protection programs, among others, Partnership for Forests, right? So, this is a donor funded program funded by the UK government, where we help transition over 5 million hectares of land to agroforestry agriculture, right? And other forms of, let's say, protecting nature and protecting intact ecosystems by mobilizing over $1.5 billion of private capital. So just to put it in context, right? So 5 million hectares is much larger than Netherlands, but this was scattered across the entire tropical belt from Brazil to parts of Africa to Southeast Asia, right? So we are active only in the tropical belt, and like I said, right, agriculture has contributed both to climate, but also to the nature crisis, including deforestation and biodiversity loss. But if we shift to such regenerative forms of agriculture, it can reverse that. And how does this happen? It happens because just to give you an example, right? If you shift from like monoculture coffee that uses a heavy amounts of fertilizer, etc., to something like agroforestry coffee, which is coffee grown under dense forest or tree cover, right? You can shift from, agriculture being a net contributor to greenhouse gas emissions to actually becoming a carbon sink. And we've done this, we've shown that this works with agroforestry coffee, with agroforestry cocoa, but also with many other like more niche, let's say, tropical commodities like vanilla and bamboo and so on. The other kind of area we work on is, let's say, creating value for standing forests. Now, this is not carbon credits and REDD Plus, although those are also important mechanisms. This is, like, to give you an example, right? We work with an organization in Suriname. They support indigenous communities to forage nuts that are grown in a tropical forest and a real standing forest. And these nuts, you can press them, right? And they have many amazing properties for the cosmeceutical industry, right? And now with the new science-based targets guidance, for those who are in the more technical community, it's the SBTI flag guidance. Companies can, use these means of, like, when they procure these oils and they procure these nuts, this can help them achieve their net zero targets, because the carbon removals that would happen in the entire forest area can be counted to their mitigation. Okay, so this is, again, to be very clear, not beyond value chain mitigation or carbon credits, right? But it's happening within their value chain. And for the local communities, it's, of course, new revenue streams, right? And it is a mechanism in which they can get compensated for protecting nature, which they do in any case, right? Because they're really the stewards of nature in these regions. And it kind of disincentivizes deforestation through, let's say, illegal mining practices, etc., right? Which they might be forced to do if there is no mechanisms to compensate them for protecting nature. So these are some of, like, some examples of very innovative organizations and what we would call regenerative companies, right, in the global south that we are partnering with. And the role that we play is that we want to connect them to the big kind of food companies who have the buying power, right, to purchase these commodities. And we would do, the impact assessment, including the greenhouse gas emission tracking, etc.
Nice. And I mean, that's a very good example, actually, in a way of I mean, let's say the use case that you describe, or example you describe, is not necessarily to be used only, maybe for procurement managers within the businesses. But I'm wondering, how can this system thinking with example that you've given be used also for anyone else now listening to this conversation? And what would you say then it's at the heart of this system plan?
Yeah, I mean, look, Of course, it's like the chief sustainability officers and procurement, leaders within organizations that we talk to and are important for us. But I think a little bit like, what you do, right? There's a role for every employee, right, to uh, create change within their organization and whatever role they're in, right? Ask the tough questions, right? I think basics, right? Like asking, has your company set science-based targets? And there is a real reason to push for having set them, because in a few years from now, the large companies who might be, your customers, right, will require that of you. So I think that's one thing companies can do. And I think as individuals also, people have a role to play, right, to think about what their own kind of footprint is and how they can compensate for it. But I think there's a lot more that individuals can do to try to help change the system as employees.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, yeah, I equally agree that there's everyone is a stakeholder, has a huge opportunity, and yeah, hopefully, really many more people engage in that. Um, I mean, and also knowing how hard this journey is, also us as a, I would call it a purposeful or social business. I mean, to survive, to thrive, and to really stick to what you believe in. Um, we also, I mean, knowing the problem of, or educating ourselves in a way of the problem of food and agriculture as we have it today. We have recently also introduced actually enabling a regenerative agriculture as one of the impact products, where again companies, for example, for every sold product or service they can also incentivize their customer with this positive impact. As I said, this is just one part of this whole topic that you are addressing, really going into the supply chain and making them greener. What we do as well, we work with partners in countries of the global south, again, where we also see the effect actually being the strongest. It's about training and also funding this transition to regenerative agriculture. And here, I mean, I guess also many people don't know what this agroforestry practices are, but it's about kind of increasing the yields and biodiversity by advancing certain farming technology, new farming technologies. But is there something in a simple way that you could explain for everyone that doesn't know what does that actually mean? Also, when they are thinking about the food maybe that they are eating, yeah, what is the regenerative agriculture in a very practical way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. And we at Systemic are, we have created like an alliance to set standards around this, right? So I think that a couple of simple ways to think about it is um, it's a set of practices, right, that improve the carbon storage in soils, the health of soils, including like how much water they can absorb, etc. The biodiversity of soils and regions. It improves the vulnerability of the soil and land to physical climate risks like drought and flooding. So there are many benefits of regenerative agriculture. I would describe them as farming techniques and approaches that lead to such beneficial outcomes. And what exactly these farming techniques are depends on both the commodity, so what you are farming, and the region where it's being applied, right? There is no one silver bullet. it is extremely complex. So, for instance, to give you very simple examples, right? So, in Europe, these practices, for large cereals like wheat and corn, etc., it might mean low tillage, so not tilling the soil in a very deep way, so that you keep the disturbance to a minimum. It could be planting cover crops so that the soil isn't laid bare, which also has many negative impacts. It's farming in a way that keeps the roots intact, so that, if you think about it, that's where like carbon is stored. That's what keeps the soil healthy and kind of together. So that's kind of in more in Europe. For more tropical commodities like coffee and cocoa, you should imagine these, to be like forests where coffee is grown, underneath. Of course, the tree density is not as much as, let's say, a typical rainforest. But farmers who use agroforestry techniques, they would grow like, nut trees and fruit trees, so that maybe the yields of coffee would drop on average a little bit, but they have additional benefits, like additional revenue streams from the other fruits and nuts that are being grown. But also, most importantly, the fact that the farmlands are less vulnerable, like I said, to drought, to extreme weather, to heat, right? So that's how you can imagine some of these techniques to be.
Yeah, very nice. I mean, exactly. And the outcome probably also is, I mean, everyone can recognize a very dry soil and very healthy soil. And yeah, the dream is, of course, to have this nice brownish, um, healthy soils with these new techniques. So yeah, I was just also for the weekend trying to spend, of course, more and more time in nature, and just feels good actually to touch the soil and see the difference. So, but with that question, just one more thing: when it comes to regenerative agriculture, we were talking also within our team, and the question came, how can we really balance this? Let's say on one hand, ecological and also economical regeneration aspects. Where on one hand we need to make sure that we actually produce enough, and usually this production comes from one sort, still currently, or very simplifiedly said. And on the other hand, that it's really economically feasible for farmers, having actually enough of different sorts in the system to make it ecologically really sustainable without depleting the soil. So how would you see this balance between ecological and economical regeneration aspects?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Diana, this is like at the heart of the problem, right? Why aren't we seeing the move kind of towards regen ag faster? It's because it's going to, like you said, cost. And unfortunately, we are expecting, the farmers to kind of bear the brunt of those costs. And it's about education, it's about upskilling, it's about assistance, technical assistance. And these are both things that we do at Regeneration, right? So we work with both donors, but also potentially private investors to kind of invest and mobilize capital, large scale capital, for the shift towards agroforestry, towards regenerative agriculture. And we also provide technical assistance through our partners at Palladium, who have a base in over 90 countries, right? So this is what we're doing, and this is our theory of change. This balance is complicated, and again differs immensely if you're talking about coffee, in Uganda, or you are talking about wheat in southern France, right? But what I would say is that every kind of region and kind of commodity focus, we need to figure out what that transition is, and we need to figure out how we finance that transition. And it will take, the banks, it will take the corporates, it will take the retailers, because ultimately we cannot expect, the farmers to bear the cost of this.
Yeah. And I assume this is also one of your biggest goals for the future. Are there any other aspirations you might have for regeneration?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's about like I said, it's about helping scale these regenerative supply chains, right? So it's about making sure that the food companies see value in this. It's for us important that we mobilize enough capital for this transition, and it's also about making really this happen, scaling this on the ground in the global south.
Yes. Very nice. There is also a great, maybe just to conclude that topic, document that we can post here in the chat from on topic of growing better, which I would really recommend to anyone interested in the topic, but in general, just out of curiosity to look into of how can we really apply this system thinking also, and in particular in such big challenge we're facing when it comes to food, and yet the opportunity. We have 2 minutes left. Aditi, we met through Women Circle that actually you initiated, which I'm very grateful. It brought a lot of great connections and met many inspiring women. Let's just call ourselves humans, but still there is some focus that you decided to put on bringing more women into the climate space. Can you tell me why is that so?
Yeah, it warms my heart to hear that this really helped you. I guess I did this. It started off like just a bunch of my friends who were on the same journey as I was, transitioning into working in climate and nature, and along different, let's say, parts of that transition, some earlier, some later. And so it was about bringing this tribe together. And I think it's important to think about belonging to a tribe, right? Because doing this is not easy. So that's why I started it, and then it grew kind of bigger, and I kept the focus on women for a couple of reasons. One is, interestingly, just more women in my circle are kind of in that, let's say, transition, or were in that transition back then. This was 2019, 2020. This was 2020. And so it was about bringing these female friends together. I think the other reason is maybe more kind of macro, is that this transition, right, to whatever you call it, to a more regenerative world or to a more low carbon future, I think it requires a completely new set of leadership capabilities. And I see many women having those, let's say, leadership qualities. the most important among them being collaboration, because these challenges, like you said, are system challenges, and you need to collaborate, be it, with other people in your value chain, be it with, NGOs, with students, or with policymakers, or be it kind of even within, with your own competitors, right? And I think this collaborative spirit is much stronger among women, and I think that's why bringing this circle together was really wonderful to see, kind of these qualities come together with helping others who are kind of transitioning and thinking about how they can have impact in the space.
Thank you, Aditi. The time is up, sadly, because I also realized I had to open private chat and not comments. I've seen some of the comments or questions here, which maybe we can even, reply afterwards. But at least one question I see was, to a certain extent, answered throughout our conversation. Thanks, everyone, for also posting those questions. And yeah, hopefully, really everyone takes a bit of insights on why applying like system thinking, can really foster a different way of production or developing economies, and also how can we give a different value actually to the natural resources, not only to protect them. Aditi, I usually end this conversation with one question, which is, what is one word that the world needs right now?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. Can I just say regeneration?
I hope so, yes. Thank you so much. Yeah, let's regenerate the world. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you soon. And thanks everyone to tuning in. Yeah, let's stay connected and let's grow together. Have a wonderful one. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. Thanks, Diana.
Thank you. Bye, DT.